So I'm not seeing any video or, monitors are not on. Are monitors coming or? I think we can proceed. So none of these monitors for us are on. Is everything else going? Okay, so we'll begin. So this is thank you for joining us. This is the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners, 9 a.m. Wednesday, December 13th, 2023. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So at this time is so Commissioner Dare is not joining us today. She'll be back next week. At this time, citizen input for items not on the agenda. So there was a request to speak, and I did speak with you about this. So I do apologize for the scenario, but thank you for your input on the topic, and there'll be some comments following by myself at least. So as citizen input, is there any input in any other item? Is there anyone online with a raised hand feature? Okay, so seeing none, next item is consent agenda. So, and this does bring up the concept and the approval and agreement with Free on the Outside. So as I say, I'll make a comment, but yeah.
Yeah, I would move approval of the consent agenda minus that item.
Oh, minus that item? Okay. So that's fine. I'll second it. And so with our consent agenda, any other discussion?
No.
Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And Chair will vote yes. So yeah, item number 2, approval of a grant agreement with Free on the Outside for the purchase and operation of new shelter and housing units for male justice-involved individuals on supervision with Deschutes County Parole and Probation.
Yeah, and I would say I do intend to vote on this, vote in favor of this grant agreement. I just think that given constituent concerns that have been expressed, it is worth discussing a little bit further. We have had some pretty extensive discussions about this item at prior board meetings, and all of that is all of that I think is still stands and is important to consider. I guess for me, one of the ways to think about the concerns that have been expressed is to ask the question, our courts, our parole and probation team, the law enforcement agencies have made the determination that someone is prepared to re-enter our community and is released on supervision, that person could show up in our community in 2 ways. They could show up in a supported transitional housing setting with house management, where their officer from parole and probation can find them and check in with them on a regular basis, and help them, support them in staying on track and reintegrating into our community. Or if we release these people back into the community and they cannot find a place to live, it's very possible they could end up homeless, interacting with all kinds of individuals who may not have the most positive influence on their future. And that person could be showing up in your neighborhood, homeless, connected, with all sorts of bad relationships, with no support, no structure, no regulatory framework around them. And I believe that the first scenario is a much better scenario for both public safety and for reintegrating people into our community.
When you use the term scenarios, and this is one of the words that comes to mind also here. So parole and probation, justice-involved individuals, pro-social behavior, best practices. This is all the things we do in our community. These are folks that, have gone through an adjudicated system, been exposed to a lot of, as I say, positive opportunities to move forward. So getting somebody landed in this environment is really a positive situation. I know it's scary and awkward, but this is going to be the grounding place to really, blossom new positive things. So there's a real positive way to look at this also. And with that, I do support this. It's exciting to be able to come up with this facility, knowing that, a lot of moving parts in the community right now, a lot of push and pull at the, state and federal level, and, just different things going on. But this is something to celebrate in our community is the conclusion I would come to.
I do think it would be one of the things that came up during all of these discussions was our community justice department shared with me that there are something like 20 sober and transitional housing projects throughout the city of Bend. I think it would be great to gather a little bit more information about those projects, the potential impacts that they're having in their community or lack of impacts that they're having on their community, and to be able to share that with neighbors of this proposed facility so that they just have a better understanding of what they might be, who their neighbors might be. Also, I would encourage anyone from that neighborhood who has concerns to contact the community justice department to talk out in greater detail the supervision framework for these individual justice involved individuals, and some of the history of how people have moved through this process and again successfully reintegrated into our community.
So yeah, we're is there a motion? As to say, we can, any other comments, but let's.
I'll move approval of a grant agreement with Free on the Outside for the purchase and operation of new shelter and housing units for male justice involved individuals on supervision with Deschutes County Parole and Probation.
And I will second it. So then another comment is, this is an opportunity to improve the exterior and the landscaping and just the look and feel of that property, which could really, be a beacon for the other properties in the area. I'm not judging here. I'm just saying this is going to be a moment where, it'll be some focus on this property. It's going to be improved slightly. And we're going to move forward. So, basically, I do see it as pretty positive. So it's been motioned and seconded. Any other discussion? So calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And Chair will vote yes. So thank you. Thank you for that process. Okay. Item 5. So this is ballot measure 110, Public Safety Partners presentation on a comprehensive approach to addressing Oregon's addiction and community livability crisis. So Steve Gunnels, our district attorney, thank you very much for joining us on this. Sounds like you have done this presentation a few times recently, so thank you very much for joining us at the Board of Commissioners. And I'm really pleased with the the items on the page, and you can go down the list here. Exciting seeing these action items to. So presentation will be behind the Board of Commissioners, but we'll see how that goes. So yeah, go ahead and proceed, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Commissioner DeBone, and I do appreciate the opportunity to present these recommendations for changes in the law that have been brought forth by the League of Oregon Cities, the Oregon Sheriff's Association, the Oregon Chiefs of Police Association, and the Oregon District Attorneys Association. They are intended to be comprehensive in terms of covering a wide range of issues related to drug possession, drug use, addiction, drug dealing, and mental health crises that we're seeing in the communities that we serve. I would note that if these proposals were adopted, they're not a panacea. They don't solve all of our problems. But I believe if all or most of these proposals were set into law by the legislature, they would improve our situation in Oregon in terms of dealing with our addiction crisis and our mental health crises in a significant way. It would be helpful, and our communities would be better and safer places to live. The overall thrust of these proposals is to strengthen the law regarding drug possession. That's the Measure 110 fix in particular. And drug dealing in order to successfully prosecute drug dealers, because it's a supply and demand problem. It's always been that, but with the current regime under Measure 110, where there's no disincentive for drug possession at low levels, it has been extremely difficult to deal with the demand side of drug use, drug addiction. We have seen in Deschutes County, we've seen a sharp reduction, a 90% reduction in the number of drug possession cases we can prosecute. And that's a shame, in my opinion. For example, in 2019, which is the last normal year for any statistic, we in Deschutes County prosecuted over 700 methamphetamine possession charges. This year, we're on track to prosecute approximately 70 methamphetamine possession charges. That doesn't mean that we're doing a great job and we're getting people off of drugs. It means that the people who are in possession of Measure 110 amounts, which is less than 2 grams of methamphetamine, which is the vast majority of methamphetamine possession cases historically, are being untouched by the criminal justice system, by the community corrections, and by treatment. So the way I view that is that we have 630 missed opportunities to redirect people into a positive lifestyle and get them into treatment, get them on supervision, and get their lives turned around. Okay. The first proposal that is being put forth is the Measure 110 reform. And the most basic way to say it is that Measure 110 did two things. The first is that it added funding for treatment facilities, treatment entities in our community by using marijuana tax money to direct it towards treatment. And that's all to the good. I have no problem with that. I want the maximum amount of drug treatment in our community that we can have, because we need what we have and more. The other thing that Measure 110 did is that it decriminalized the possession of relatively small amounts of drugs, what prosecutors call simple possession cases, small amount drug cases, which are, as I mentioned, the vast majority of drug cases that we encounter. And this proposal from the groups that I mentioned would recriminalize the possession of small amounts of drugs. It would turn those possessions into Class A misdemeanors. So a misdemeanor is a crime for which a person could spend up to a year in jail but cannot go to prison. And realistically, you're not talking about a year in jail for drug possession. Judges would typically send somebody to jail for 10 to 30 days, maybe 60 days at the most if they have a really bad record for a misdemeanor drug possession charge. The goal, yeah.
Just kind of thinking the big picture here, the marijuana revenue, the Measure 110, kind of put it in one big pool to be distributed for these, resources in the community. But the funny part is we probably would have done the same thing. It's like, it all got consolidated and then there was a committee to review and send the dollars. But if we had the dollars locally, we probably would have invested in some of these things, same things, a little bit more local control. So just acknowledging that from a Board of Commissioners point of view, we still would have done good things with those dollars.
Yeah, and there's some other proposals in here that really are grant funding type proposals that I think really are better for communities. If, for example, our county commissioners could decide where the dollars are needed, it's better for the community than having Salem decide where the dollars are needed. But that's kind of beyond the scope of the Deschutes County District Attorney. The goal of this particular reform is to get people into treatment, to get them onto supervised probation that's paid for by state funds. There are many misdemeanors that are not funded. The supervision is not funded, but the proposal is to have all supervision of offenders be funded for possession crimes.
Well, and that's a policy choice that we've made at our budget committee, is to provide resources for misdemeanor supervision. So that is the local decision that we have invested in.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely important, especially with drug possession and mental illness cases, so that you have a probation officer who can direct the person, help the person get into treatment, and make sure that they stay in treatment. And if they decide to leave treatment, they're held accountable for it immediately. That accountability is the most important part of drug treatment, in my opinion. So the goal is treatment, and there, under this proposal, there would be options for diversion of these cases so that people could avoid a conviction if they go through with it, if they go through and get their treatment, they're successful on probation, and they do everything they're supposed to do. We used to have a statute called the conditional discharge statute here in Oregon until 10 years ago or so. And it was a great statute. It allowed for people who are arrested for simple possession of drugs to be on probation with drug treatment. And if they did everything they were supposed to do at the end of their probation, the charge would be dismissed, and they didn't have to worry about that showing up on their record anymore. And so that's what this proposal is. Okay. And so that's the only one that is directly on point with Measure 110. And I believe that recriminalizing at the misdemeanor level would be adequate to get a significant improvement in community safety and public health with addicted people that come into the criminal justice system. I think that's necessary. That is really the flaw of Measure 110, as I see it. The next proposal is a case law fix for delivery of drugs. It's is being labeled the Boyd-Hubbell fix. The Boyd case is a case from 1989 in which the Oregon Supreme Court held that if somebody is in possession with drugs with the intent to deliver them, they can be prosecuted for delivery of the drug. And you don't have to wait until there's a hand-to-hand delivery in order to arrest and prosecute the person for the delivery. In 2021, the Oregon Supreme Court came down with the Hubbell decision, which reinterpreted that statute, the delivery statute, and said, essentially, you have to have somebody who is in the process of delivering the drugs before you can prosecute them for delivery, which makes it very difficult to hold people accountable who are delivering poison in the community. This is a proposal to redefine delivery to include possession with intent to distribute, which is modeled on the federal statute for delivery of a controlled substance. And I believe that this would be an effective fix to the Hubbell problem.
I appreciate the simplicity and clarity of these proposals here too. So I can imagine an officer in the street or a situation where somebody has, multiple doses packaged up, obvious, scenario ready for distribution, but didn't catch you doing it. So yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, it's been frustrating since that decision came down. If somebody's caught with a number of packages of drugs, large quantities of drugs, scales, packaging material, drug sales records, cash, they have to be, at most, they can be prosecuted for attempted delivery or possession. And if you prosecute somebody for attempted delivery, that means that their sentence is reduced dramatically, as opposed to delivery, which is what they're actually doing. The next proposal is a fix, a modification to Senate Bill 48. Senate Bill 48 was a Senate bill that reclassified the kinds of crimes that can be holdable in our jails. And so this fix is designed to allow jails, sheriff's offices to hold individuals who are arrested for delivery of drugs until the judge sees them. Then the judge can make a decision. Currently, for many drug delivery cases, in fact, most drug delivery cases, people are taken to jail and they're being released on their own recognizance or under conditions without ever seeing a judge because of Senate Bill 48. So this would fix that and allow for the courts to actually make the decision about release for drug dealers, so that we don't have the revolving door at the jails for them. Okay, the next proposal is to fund supervision of misdemeanor property crimes where there is a drug addiction nexus to the crime. The statistics nationally show that 50 to 80% of property crimes are associated with individuals who are being committed by individuals who have a drug or alcohol addiction. And so what we want to do, what this proposal would have Oregon do, is to fund misdemeanor probation. Theft in the second degree would be an example of that, where somebody steals $999 worth of products at Target, and that's a misdemeanor. And if they are, placed on probation, it's a bench probation. They don't get a probation officer. But under this proposal, they would get a probation officer, and it would be funded. The community corrections would be paid for that supervision through state funding. And those individuals could be ordered to be screened and connected to mandatory treatment, and they would be held accountable for following through with that by their probation officer and the courts. And so that addresses a pretty glaring hole in our supervision matrix, where people are not, properly supervised in the community, who are, drug addicts, and they're harming businesses, they're harming their neighbors by stealing from them. And it's very difficult to hold them accountable if they're not on supervision. Okay. The next proposal is for the criminalization of public use of a controlled substance. So in addition to possession of the small amounts of controlled substance, the public use of controlled substance would be criminalized under this proposal. I believe the idea for this comes from Portland. I believe Portland City Council had proposed creating a city ordinance criminalizing public use because they have experienced a significant increase in people on sidewalks, in the parks, and so on, using drugs openly, smoking drugs, injecting drugs, and so on publicly, and it's kind of a blight, for one thing. It makes people feel unsafe. It makes people unsafe in the community to see that. And this is designed to address that. It would make it a Class A misdemeanor to use a controlled substance in a public place. It also allows funding for treatment and supervision costs associated with probation, associated with the conviction. It would be a statewide law, not a city ordinance. And that way, around the state, people could enforce this law. The next proposal is to criminalize the use of drugs in an enclosed space that endangers another person. So if somebody is in a bus, for example, a transit bus, and they start smoking fentanyl or injecting fentanyl, they could potentially be arrested and prosecuted for this crime, in addition to the possession of the drug or public use. This is designed to address situations where people are smoking, in particular, these hard drugs in areas where the public is also confined. And we've heard horror stories about places around the state where people are just so blasé about the use of drugs that they're doing it in public places, inside buildings, inside homeless shelters, inside buses, and so on. And that's what this is designed to address. It would be a Class A misdemeanor for the first offense and Class C felony for repeat offenders. And it only applies if the people in danger do not consent to it. So if there are two buddies who are getting together to smoke drugs and they agree that that's what they're doing in an enclosed space, that wouldn't be this crime. But if there's an unwilling participant to that event, it would fit under the definition of this statute. And again, treatment and supervision would receive state funding, and so all of these are designed to get people into treatment and not just put them in jail. Okay. The next proposal is to prioritize adequate and stable funding for specialty courts. And this is a kind of something that's near and dear to my heart. I was a drug court prosecutor for 20 years, and our drug court has recently had to shut down because of lack of a treatment court coordinator primarily, and treatment options as well. I believe that this should be crafted to meet the needs of each community. And I know in our county, there is a feeling that the high-end drug court model may not be practical at this time, but a court-connected model would also be effective and could be implemented with our current resources. So I do think that there should be some flexibility if the statute is adopted to allow local authorities to design a program that fits their needs and doesn't overwhelm their capacity. So these drug court programs are always court programs. And so there really needs to be a lot of consultation with the Oregon Judicial Department about what they can do, and with local courts about whether they actually have the resources to cover this. And Commissioner Chang and I are on a committee to make recommendations, in particular regarding giving some more local control to these decisions, so that local courts can decide what they can and can't cover effectively.
And I got to imagine each jurisdiction will have different resources, different nonprofit providers, different experience in the community to be able to offer those support services. So there's always going to be a little bit different mix no matter where you go.
Yes, and we are, I know that our courts are very supportive of the treatment model and connecting to the court, because that's one of the things that makes treatment effective in the criminal justice system, is a connection to the court, so that people have to check in regularly and talk to the judge and explain what they have or haven't done. But the drug court model is extremely resource intensive. It's expensive and it takes a lot of court time. And so not every community has those resources. And so I think that needs to be built into this proposal. Okay. The next proposal is to allow police to initiate welfare holds for intoxicated people. Currently, police have the authority to take somebody on a peace officer's hold if the person is severely mentally ill in an acute mental health crisis and a danger to themselves or others. This proposal would allow the police to take people into the same kind of a hold situation up to 72 hours if they pose a danger to themselves or others due to an acute intoxication of drugs or alcohol. It's very similar to the peace officer hold that we currently have on the books, and people would be directed into treatment and aftercare and wraparound services under this proposal, so that it's not just drop them off at the hospital and forget about it. The idea is that there would be funding behind this for aftercare and getting them into a treatment facility of something of that nature. I would mention, and I have mentioned before, that my wife is a nurse, and on her behalf, I will say the hospitals would probably not be super thrilled if the idea here is to take severely intoxicated people and drop them off at the hospital and let the hospital deal with it, because the emergency rooms are already overwhelmed with mental health and other, physical ailments on a daily basis, and they may not be able to withstand a flood of individuals going who are extremely intoxicated under this statute. So the better model would be to have sobering or stabilization centers for this kind of individual who is severely intoxicated with a severe addiction issue, so that they can get held in a secure facility and redirected into treatment at the end of that 72-hour hold period.
DA Gunnels, so people would have the opportunity to enter treatment, be encouraged to enter treatment after the 72-hour hold, but there wouldn't be any requirement or compulsion.
So that's a good question. The proposal doesn't really cover that, I would say. Under the current system, if the police officer takes somebody to the hospital on a 72-hour peace officer's hold, they turn them over to the hospital, then the hospital gets to make decisions about whether it's appropriate to commit the person due to severe mental illness that is long-standing and needs treatment. And if they continue to be a threat to themselves or others, they can be committed and sent to the state hospital or to a local secure residential facility for a period of time, or they can be supervised in the community under PSRB. And so those are decisions that are medical decisions. And so I think that a better model would be to allow medical professionals to make decisions about what is needed in terms of treatment. And if there's a commitment ability after the 72 hours, I think that would be a better solution than just 72 hours, dry out, and then tell people that there's such a thing as treatment. But that's not in this proposal that was put forth. It could be added, and I think it would make it stronger.
Yeah, agree. And I also have the concern that we hear about people going to jail for short periods of time, clearing out their system to some degree, not having a sense of how much substance their body can take when they get out, and then going and overdosing and killing themselves. So I mean, I would have some concerns about this 72-hour hold having similar results. If there was not a way to make sure that people got on the right track.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I think that's something that should be part of the legislative discussion on this particular proposal. I think that would make it a better bill and potentially lead to a significant number of people who are forced to go into treatment and come out on the other side better than they were when they went in. The next proposal is to increase capacity for stabilization, detoxification, and treatment capacity. It's primarily a funding proposal in order to increase capacity in those areas for acute and long-term sobriety and treatment. And there needs to be an ability to deal with people who are withdrawing from drugs, as you mentioned, Commissioner Chang, people who are addicted to, in particular, alcohol and opioids, go through severe withdrawals when they're taken away from those drugs. And this proposal would include not only treatment options, but withdrawal support outside of a hospital setting, but in a quasi-medical facility for people who are going through that experience of withdrawal from hard drugs and alcohol. And alcohol is one of the hardest drugs to withdraw from, just as a side note. Okay, the next proposal is kind of an outside the box proposal. It's an opioid overdose quick response team. This is not the kind of team that would go out at the moment that an overdose is happening. That's for law enforcement and EMTs to address, to bring naloxone and try to revive people who are experiencing opioid overdose in particular. And these people would not be with the first responders. They would come in within 72 hours after an overdose when the iron is hot and potentially the person is trying to make decisions about their future, about whether they're going down the right path in the immediate aftermath of an overdose. This would be grant funded to communities to decide how to do it. It would be very similar to the mental health response team that we have here in Deschutes County that goes out under more acute circumstances, but these people would just be directing people towards treatment and trying to intervene in their addiction in a meaningful way. In some communities, and there's one in Ohio that is believed to be a model for how this could run. And it involves a law enforcement officer, EMT, peer recovery mentor, and a treatment provider as members of the team to intervene and try to direct people into treatment, get them well. In my experience with court in dealing with drug addiction, people oftentimes need to hit rock bottom before they get the message that things aren't going well in their life and they need to make a big change. And so the idea here is that if you overdose and have to be brought back to life, hopefully that's your rock bottom and you get the message that this is the time to make a big change.
So if I could ask about this, so
Yeah.
the example you gave, that sounds like it's a local government team, but across multiple agencies within a county or within within a city. Are there any models of this or examples of this where it's organized outside of a local government kind of framework?
I'm not aware of one. I don't think it would be. I don't think it's necessarily I don't think it necessarily has to be affiliated with the government agency. The only concern I would have about it, though, is that if you have private citizens going out to some homes where drug use is a common feature, it could lead to some high levels of danger to those people. And so having some kind of law enforcement support, I think, would be important. Potentially having emergency medical support would be important in case they encounter people who are overdosing, things like that. But the public safety part of it would concern me, with simply asking citizens to go to some of the houses that I'm familiar with.
So I mean, we're talking about theoretically building some kind of cross-cutting teams within the county and city.
Right. And there could be a public-private association that does this as well, so that you have actual treatment providers. Typically are, other than county behavioral health, treatment providers are typically private entities, Best Care and Pfeiffer and so on. And having their involvement would be, I think, extremely useful to try to explain what treatment is and how it could work for the individual. Okay. The next proposal, and the last, you'll be relieved, is for residential and secure residential treatment facilities, residential and secure residential treatment facilities. And this is for people who have mental health and substance use challenges in their lives, and addressing the shortage of those facilities in communities around the state and likely around the country, and in our community as well. one of the things that it would do is ensure that land use policies for siting those facilities comply with federal law. And you all will understand the Fair Housing Act requirements much better than I do. But that's a feature of this proposal as well. And the concern, and one of the things that this proposal would intend to address, is that the facilities meet safety and security requirements under all law, and that they are actually safe and secure, so that you don't have such a severe NIMBY problem as like an open door policy at a facility where people can just wander around. It would be an actual secure facility.
When we do have our Deschutes Treatment Center, one facility like this, it's kind of the only one in Eastern Oregon. So we have a model, and it's very expensive, and Deschutes County is still paying off internal debt on even building that thing from 10 or 15 years ago. But yeah, doing that multiple times is probably a high priority right now.
Yeah, there is a demand for these kinds of facilities, and I know that we struggle in court, and I believe Community Corrections struggles as well to find that kind of bed availability when needed. But we do have a great community that puts resources out there, but because of the kind of extreme nature of the problem right now, I think it's safe to say that we need more.
And it's good that I think this is mentioned at least in passing in policy proposal number 9 as well. But as we know from many of our housing discussions that we have, it takes more than just supportive land use for us to get some of the facilities that we need.
Yes. Yeah, and so this also has a funding component in the proposal, which I think would be vital, getting state funds directed hopefully towards communities to pay for these things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where it currently stands, but our health services department has been holding a few $1 million for a secure residential treatment facility for a number of years now. And there's an absence of the additional funds needed and the partner to build and operate that, to bring that funding to fruition and to get the facilities that we need. So land use would certainly be helpful, but I think it's more of an investment problem than a land use problem.
So you're representing this effort, which is district attorneys, sheriff's office, chiefs of police, League of Oregon Cities. So that's kind of the paper that's being going around the state. Thank you very much for being engaged at this level, and to say breaking it down into small digestible pieces. At this point in time, it is time for the legislature to take some of these up, codify them, and discuss them on the House floor and the Senate floor. I was able to join the Leadership Summit in Portland on Monday afternoon, and this is a high priority for everybody. The chair of the Multnomah County Commission, the mayor of Portland, the governor are all standing there side by side saying we need to do some things. This really gives them some actions to be able to discuss.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if I could also just say, it is the time for the legislature to take action. I appreciate the DAs, the sheriffs, the police chiefs, and the League of Oregon Cities for signing on to this package. I think it would be appropriate for the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners to consider signing on to this package, maybe with a couple of minor tweaks, like the specialty court proposal. We've developed, I believe, a much more thoughtful approach to building that capacity at the local level within our local public safety coordinating council than exists in this paper. But I would like us to consider writing a letter in support of this package, with a couple of emphasizing a couple of things. That having that one slight modification in it. I think one of the other really important things to emphasize is that this is a comprehensive bundle that I can see with all of these pieces happening at the level that that is proposed. I could see doing a lot of good, but if people cherry pick this and just want to do this thing or that thing, there are things that could have actually, maybe perverse negative consequences. So emphasizing that all of these components need to move forward, and that a number of the pieces in here they are massive investment items, and I think saying that these are necessary investments for us to get a handle on this crisis in the state of Oregon and in our community is important, and also calling on the legislature to think real hard about what the funding mechanisms would be to move some of these proposals forward. The treatment capacity, the supervision capacity. I mean, Janice and Devi are here. I mean, they could speak to what it would take to build some of the capacity that's described in this paper. If we wanted to ask them to do that, but it is. I mean, I think we're talking about tens of millions of dollars at the local level, not to mention the state level.
So one of the concepts in there is the discretion of prosecution, discretion of the bench, because it does talk about going from a violation to the Class A misdemeanor, and that's a step, that the people voted to decriminalize, but I think it went a lot farther, faster than expected. Fentanyl is a crisis on top of it, just compounding the issue, and then inflation and interest rates, just the economy on top of it. But as I say, I do support that discretion of prosecution and discretion at the bench to be able to, make relationships and aim people in the right direction. So yeah, I'd be supportive of a letter. We can put something together and be strategic about it. And maybe it's injecting as the legislature starts to come up with some bills or getting to our legislators about specific items, and then being engaged in the legislative session also.
That works for me. Yeah, the letter the very brief letter that the three of us signed on to earlier, I thought was an okay letter, but this is this is a much more substantial proposal, and we could even build on that a little bit more in the letter that we write.
Shall we bring a letter back for your consideration at your last meeting of the year, which is next Wednesday, December 20th?
Yeah, and we can go back and forth a little bit before that for input from individual commissioners. Because remember, it all started off with the concept of repeal or reform, and I, went down the reform path. Let's take what we have and try to, dial it back or fix it, whatever we can do. And it was mentioned by Commissioner Dare, no, we need to repeal. But in the paper today, I think her comments were, let's look for the reform option. So I mean, it was just a moment, and that was the decision at that point.
I'm glad we've got there. Yeah, I mean,
well, we're not speaking for it, but I just read it in the paper.
I mean, at the highest level, we all need to understand that before Measure 110, we had inadequate drivers to get people into treatment, and we had inadequate capacity to treat people. Post Measure 110, or with Measure 110, we still have inadequate drivers to get people into treatment. We have a little bit more treatment capacity, and this is, I believe, an opportunity. That this next legislative session could be an opportunity for us to turn the dial a little bit more on the drivers to get people into treatment and on the treatment capacity. So we're baby steps towards hopefully a workable solution and viable model that other states will want to replicate.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
So at this time, item number 6, public hearing and consideration of an ordinance amending section 2.37.120 of the Deschutes County Code to clarify contracting processing procedures.
Morning, Commissioners. Dave Doyle, County Attorney. This is a time for a public hearing to consider an ordinance to amend section 2.37.120 of the Deschutes County Code. You'll recall we were here earlier in the fall with a package of contracting code amendments. This should have been captured in that. It wasn't, and so we're bringing it forward now. You'll recall those earlier amendments don't take effect until January 1st. And so this does have a request for emergency adoption aligned with that and take effect on January 1st. In short, the provision simply indicates that when the notice of intent to award a contract states that the contract may be processed administratively, that means it doesn't require further action of the board. So when you give the blessing on a notice of intent, for instance, some of our road projects and whatnot, rather than bring that contract back for you folks, it'll process administratively through the department, through the county administrator, through county legal. And that's in essence been our practice for the most part, but the code wasn't really clear on that. So we clarify that as part of the package.
So the board will still be signing those contracts. We just don't need to bring it back to a second board meeting, probably. If it's at the right level of, signature authority.
Unless you give it authority for
Yep.
the purchasing agent or the county administrator to sign that,
Mhm.
which very likely could.
Sometimes we
occur.
need. Okay. Okay, so with that, this is a public hearing on the matter. So this is an ordinance to amend Deschutes County code to clarify contract processing procedures. Is there anyone to testify in this matter? Is there anyone online for this? Okay, so seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And the proposal is to, Yeah.
First and second reading by title only, and then approve the emergency adoption effective January 1.
Procedurally, can we do emergency adoption if it's unanimous, if only two of us are here?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We do have a quorum if it's unanimous with the quorum. Yeah, so if there's three of you, it takes 3-0. If it's two, it takes 2-0.
I'll move first and second readings of ordinance number 2023-026, amending DCC 2.37.120 to clarify existing procedure relative to contract processing post notice of intent to award.
and I will second it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. So this is first reading of ordinance number 2023-026, an ordinance amending section 2.37.120 of title 2.37, contracting the Deschutes County Code by emergency adoption. And this was the second reading of ordinance number 2023-026, an ordinance amending section 2.37.120 of title 2.37, contracting of the Deschutes County Code and declaring an emergency. So adoption at this time then?
I'll move emergency adoption of ordinance 2023-026, amending Deschutes County Code 2.37.120 to clarify existing procedure relative to contract processing post notice of intent to award.
And I will second it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang
Yes.
and Chair will vote yes. Here we go. Thank you. At this time, item number 7, sale of property at 51950 Huntington Road in Lapine to Habitat for Humanity, Lapine Sun River. Got a few folks that came into the room today to join us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Christy Bollinger, Deschutes County Property Management. We also have Vicki here, and I'll have her introduce herself.
Vicki Russell. I chair the board for Habitat Lapine Sun River.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're here this morning to request the board's support of completing the sale of property of 5.2 acres in the Quadrant 2A in the Newberry neighborhood located at 51950 Huntington Road in Lapine. So just to go back in time a little bit, back in actually it was early 2022, the county at the direction of the board issued a request for proposals for the disposition and sale of Quadrant 2A and Quadrant 2D in the Newberry neighborhoods. At that time, the board supported reserving 2 acres in each of those quadrants for a total of 4 acres. And to date, those 2 quadrants have not sold. And so Habitat came forward a few months ago and requested that the board support the sale of 4 acres in Quadrant 2A instead. And after they did their initial layout, they came back and requested an additional 1 acre and offered to pay $50,000 for that. After their more finalized layout, they came back and asked for additional 0.202 acres. So right now we're at 5.02 acres, 4 acres of
Are you
conveyance.
asking for more today?
Nope. nope,
Okay.
No. Just
I know,
trying to
it's
sum it up
funny
for
that-
you.
I know, we've been through this together, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, we're here today just to ask for the board support to complete the conveyance of 5.02 acres. And then I'll just pause there for any comments from Vicky and the board.
Great, thank you for joining us.
On behalf of the Habitat Board and everybody in the county, I just want to thank you. This will provide 34 homes. With the property, it allows us to reach down into that income level. And I want to especially let all of you know you're part of a legacy because it is generational when our families are put in homes with their children and relatives. And so again, thank you so much.
Well, I know it's a community effort. Habitat isn't just a one person show or one group of people. It's the community that helps, from the builders to the people that learn about how construction works, getting some equity, getting into their homes, offsetting the costs up front to get the final package to be able to get somebody to move in. It's a big process and it's a community effort. So thank you very much for everybody that's involved with that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lapine Sun River Habitat, for making projects like this possible. They are so important to members of our community who want to go to work every day, want to raise their kids, want to be upstanding, members of our community and contribute, but who struggle to be able to find a place to live, to be able to do that. So I'm so excited that the county was able to make this commitment to Lapine Sun River Habitat. And I'm also very glad that we've been able to be flexible and adapt and tinker a number of times to get to this moment today, so that we can see these 34 homes move forward. And with that, I will move approval of board signature of order number 2023-043, authorizing the sale of 5.02 acres at 51950 Huntington Road in Lapine to Habitat for Humanity Lapine Sun River. And should the authorization for the property manager be separate?
You can do it in the same motion.
Okay. And further authorizing the Deschutes County property manager to execute all needed documents to effect the sale.
And I will second it. Any other discussion?
I guess, one other small benefit of this project that I haven't mentioned, or we haven't mentioned, is the sale of one of these 5 acres is going to put $50,000 into our groundwater protection fund, which is running quite low on funds right now. So that little infusion of dollars will help us move forward more people with their retrofit projects in South County and help to protect our groundwater quality for everyone. So it's a win-win all around on that final 1 acre sale.
Well, the 2 other things that come to mind is having the land to be able to build into the future, and that was what was discussed the last few years. If you utilize all the existing parcels that are available, what's the next few years going to be like? So now we have a future there. And then also this did start with the idea of a couple acre donation during development as the development was happening at a breakneck pace just a couple of years ago, but we had to switch gears. So this is exciting seeing this happen, move forward, a lot of excitement in the community and a great name. So thank you very much. So with that, calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
And Chair will vote yes. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see everybody. Item number 8, Veterans Behavioral Health Peer Support Specialist Program Grant Application.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kristen.
Yes, I'm Kristen Mazaki. I am Behavioral Health Program Manager for the adult outpatient teams and our 2 hubs in Redmond and Lapine. I'm here seeking approval for OHA grant for continuation of funding our peer support specialists who focus specifically on serving veterans in our community. As I just mentioned, this is a continuation of a grant that we currently have that's terming at the end of this month. So this would allow us to continue to fund this peer support specialist position for the next 19 months, starting in February.
So it was just put out knowing that it's expiring soon. So that, yeah, it's kind of got to be a real small window. I see
Absolutely,
how
yes,
this was going.
at the end of the month. So.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But we know that peer supports do, a magical, incredible work with populations who are in need. We know that veterans are a really important population in our community to focus on. Can you talk a little bit about how this position, up to now, maybe moving forward, works with works with partner organizations in our community to contact the veterans who can benefit from these services?
Absolutely. I mean, currently, the veteran serving partners in the community are a big part of what our peer support specialist does. She goes out and connects with the different organizations, attends different meetings, does a lot of care coordination. She also partners with our homeless outreach team to meet folks out in the community. She's able to do this without for people who are not currently clients of behavioral health. So there's not that barrier there. It removes that. So she's able to go out and coordinate care, connect with people, anybody in the community who's a veteran who's needing support. So we have a lot of, just opens up that door, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of work with the Veterans Department as well, COVO and the other organizations that work with veterans.
Great. Yeah, I think I was hearing about how this position is making their way out to the Central Oregon Veterans Ranch, on a regular basis, and so that made me start thinking about, well, like where else is this person plugging in that would be good to it's just helpful to we can sometimes talk about positions and it gets very abstract. You can have a list of duties, but when you start to kind of situate it across the landscape, well, they're out there with the homeless outreach service team, they're out there with the Central Oregon Veterans Ranch, and they're over here with COVO this day. Then it makes it a little bit less abstract for us to understand what these folks are doing. So.
Another thing, we're hoping to be able to expand this position out a little bit more to work with our hubs. So out in Redmond and Lapine, knowing that there's folks, veterans in both of those communities that have trouble accessing needed services, as well as with our stabilization center when veterans are needing support there, being able to then have our peer come in and connect with them and be able to help them navigate from there to whatever services and supports they're needing. So that's the vision.
Yeah, thank you. And so this won't be an expansion. This is kind of continuation as it's currently working.
Yes, it's not adding an additional position. It's continuing to fund the position that we currently have and expand out a little bit more the work that she's doing.
Great. Thank you.
Motion. Yep.
Move approval to apply for a veteran behavioral health peer support specialist program grant from the Oregon Health Authority.
And I will second it. Yeah, so it's good to know we've got these folks out there offering services. We're in a real challenging time on many levels, but this is a great effort by our community. It's funded by the Oregon Health Authority. So with that, any other comment?
No.
Calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
And Chair will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Good luck.
At this time, we'll convene as the governing body of the Deschutes County 911 Service District. Item number 9, contract with L3 Harris for completion of the Deschutes County 911 Radio Enhancement Plan. A plan to spend money is what I'm seeing here.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Crosswhite, Director of Deschutes County 911.
Jonathan Spring, Tech Manager, Deschutes County 911.
And we are coming before you today for request for approval and signature of a Harris contract, which would finalize our radio enhancement agreement that has been 5 years in the making. What this request is this request for signature on the contract that would not be started until July 1st. The intention is that we can order everything that we need and it'll be here in the fiscal year 25 so that we can actually complete the 2 projects, which is the site at the road department and the site at our back.
So the system design is pretty much stable, and we just need to get these items on order. That's what I'm seeing.
It is spending money, but it could also be viewed as like strategic critical investments
No, it's, yeah.
in the final pieces of the system upgrade, which is really exciting.
Well, it's all about just, lead times and the availability of the equipment. So, thank you for, having this written up so well. As I say, I'm very supportive. I'm involved with communication statewide level, and a lot of people wonder, how did you do that? And what are you guys doing? So it's a lot of history here, partners with the state when we were able to have that opportunity also.
I don't have any further questions.
Yeah.
I'll move approval of chair signature on document number 2023-1042, an agreement with L3 Harris for 911 radio system enhancements.
And I will second it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Good. Thank you so much. We'll reconvene as the governing body of Deschutes County. Item number 10, Oregon State Weed Board Grant Application for Deschutes County Noxious Weed Program. Welcome, Kevin.
Morning, Commissioners. Kevin Moriarty, County Forester. I'm here today on behalf of the Natural Resources Department to seek board authorization to apply for a state weed board grant for the purpose of producing outreach material, updating the noxious weed trailer, and to survey and treat key noxious weed species within Deschutes County. The project would utilize partners on the Deschutes County Noxious Weed Board to develop outreach material and to generate a unified message that could be distributed throughout the county. Partners would also collaborate on surveys and treatment for key A-rated species like Horiolisum and orange hawkweed. If granted, funds would be used for new trailer upgrades such as a bulletin board, new audio-video equipment, aquatic and terrestrial invasive species models and presses, printable materials, and short videos to display at outreach events. In addition, posters and brochures and audio PSA messaging would be developed for distribution throughout media channels. The Deschutes County Noxious Weed Board would also collaborate on surveys and work with landowners to treat high priority species. At this time, the grant would be requesting $30,780. $12,000 would be used for outreach material and trailer upgrades, and $15,000 would be used for landowner noxious weed treatments. And then there would be an additional $3,780 for administrative and indirect costs. And at this time, I'll just open up for comments and questions.
We have a active weed board right now, community members.
We do. Last year, we didn't have enough seats, but now we have 7 members active on our weed board, and we're trying to recruit more. So we are starting to gain some traction.
What's the status with some of the roadside signs, noxious weeds? It's your responsibility, call the road department signs. I know that there's one that's not hanging on State Rec Road these days. Has that come up at all?
I think that's something that the road department manages, but I could work with them to make sure that we do have those updated.
The frame is there and the sign's not there anymore. It was a nice wooden frame. You see them around Central Oregon. In fact, I think Jefferson County has one in the same form as ours. So maybe that's news for you. I don't know. Yeah. So the frame's still there and there's no sign in it right now.
Okay.
Well, and then, back to weeds specifically, Let's Pull Together was always a big event. Previously had been a big event, so just a cycle and, post-COVID right now too. But knapweed is definitely prevalent in southern Deschutes County. My wife and I found one right in the front middle of our driveway, and we don't have them on our property, but it was right there this last summer, and she just went nuts, get out there and pull that weed. We did it together. But yeah, just getting the word out, the community to understand that these things, there's some neighborhoods in southern Deschutes County where people just need to know, because they take a little extra time, but people are, some folks are losing track of the priority of it maybe.
Yeah, the Noxious Weed Board had identified some key species throughout the county to try and work on with this grant proposal. And those include Horulissum, orange hawkweed, yellow flag iris, myrtle spurge, spotted knapweed, yellow floating heart, and potentially yellow star thistle. So
Yeah,
those
but
are
just
the
education would be
really
helpful
trying to
in all of it.
prioritize.
Yeah.
Kevin, can you give us a feel for whether we are, making progress wouldn't be the right phrase, but like how we're doing at holding the line on, even some of these most aggressive species. Whenever we talk about noxious weeds and control efforts and investments, I always feel like the amount of funds available is really inadequate for the job, for the task at hand. And we're losing ground every day. But I mean, if we're, I guess if we can have an impact, lose ground less quickly, hold the line in certain areas on certain species, then that should be considered a form of progress. But I mean, can you highlight for us some of the at the high level, some of the progress that's being made in our region on some of these invasive species?
Yeah, sure. So I work directly with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. Dan Sun is our representative. There's a few species out there, like Horulissum in particular was known to be eradicated in Deschutes County. We've now recently found that as of last year. So that's something we're really trying to focus efforts on to make sure that we can get it back to eradication. Other species like orange hawkweed, that we have pretty good idea of where that is, so we can do treatments at this time. Whereas species like yellow flag iris have been treated to a point, but I think there's been a lapse over the years, and now we're starting to see pretty substantial populations on the Deschutes River. We've worked with Jefferson County and Crook County on a collaborative project of mapping yellow flag iris the last 2 years, and we have a pretty good idea, at least on the Deschutes River where it's located. And then now we're going to try and focus efforts on treatments of yellow flag iris. Some of these more prolific species like spotted knapweed, and even getting into what we would call our C-rated species like Russian thistle and cheatgrass and things like that we are starting to probably lose that battle as far as trying to combat them, to keep them in control. Unfortunately, when it comes to how we rate our weed species A, B, and C, those C species, we don't get any funding for them, and they're not prioritized. And so that does become an issue. But we can utilize fire fuel funds for things like cheatgrass and Russian thistle as well. So I try and utilize those funds as well as noxious weed funds to try and combat a lot of these species. But probably the biggest thing right now is just to really get out the message and make sure it's unified among all our partners, so that people can understand not only what species they should be looking for, but what the treatments can happen as well. Because a lot of people, just like everything else, if landowners take it upon themselves, we can move the ball forward as far as treating some of these species.
Thank you.
Great.
Good to have a inspirational speech on that.
Yeah.
A motion.
I'll move approval or move to authorize submittal of an application for an Oregon State Weed Board grant for Deschutes County.
And I will second it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang
Yes.
and Chair will vote yes. Thank you. I'm always excited to get the word out on these things, and we'll see you at the county fair with the weed wagon.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 11, work session, plan amendment and zone change at 54430 Hunnell Road. So we would have done this on a Monday afternoon, but it just fit in our schedule today. So thank you for joining us, Jacob.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Jacob Ripper, Principal Planner with the county's Community Development Department. Yes, as you just mentioned, this is a work session in preparation for a hearing next Wednesday, December 20th. It's to consider a proposed plan amendment and zone change. The applicant's requesting a change in the comprehensive plan to go from agricultural to rural residential exception area, along with a corresponding zone change to go from exclusive farm use, EFU, to multiple use agricultural, MUA 10. And so this will be the second of 2 required hearings. The first was held in front of the county's hearings officer, who did recommend approval of the proposal, and that's attached as attachment 2 in your packet today. A little bit about the property. It's 40 acres in size. It's about 1.5 miles north of the Bend UGB. It sits between Highway 97 to the east and Highway 20 to the west. It fronts on Hunnell Road along its western boundary. And then some of the surrounding uses are mostly residential, some small scale agricultural uses in the area too. All of the properties to the north, west, and south are in the MUA 10 zone. They're about 5 to 10 acres in size. And then there's a larger parcel to the east. It is in the EFU zone and it's owned by the county. Just a little bit about the application and why it was recommended for approval. As you've seen in similar proposals, the applicant is requesting this change because they are proposing that the land does not qualify as agricultural land, as that term is defined in the Oregon administrative rules. And therefore no exception to statewide planning goal 3, which has to do with agricultural land, is required either. A soils assessment was submitted, prepared by a qualified soil scientist. It found that 26.2 acres of the 40 consisted of class 7 and 8 soils. So that's roughly 65% of the property. And because of those soil classification and not meeting some of the other criteria for considering agricultural land. So that would be things like, can this property be used in conjunction with another commercial farm in the area? Is there a history of farming on it? Is irrigation available? Those types of features. So based on that, the hearings officer determined that the subject property meets those criteria for consideration of a non-resource zoning designation. So that public hearing was held on November 14th. Shortly thereafter, on the 23rd, the hearings officer issued his recommendation. And then I just wanted to note that the original packet of applications came with a tentative plan for a 4-lot subdivision as well. But because that subdivision would be dependent on the successful outcome of this process, those have been decoupled and the subdivision basically put on hold until and if the plan amendment zone change is approved. So if you're going through the record, there will be lots of comments and proposed findings from the applicant directed towards subdivision criteria, but that's not applicable in this process. I also wanted to note that during the process, no public comments were received. Only the applicant's attorney provided testimony at the public hearing. And yeah, I'm available for any questions that you may have or take requests for further information at next week's hearing. I will be presenting a short staff report and PowerPoint. and the applicant's attorney will be presenting as well. So after next week's hearing, the board can decide to continue the public hearing, close the public hearing and leave the written record open, or close both the hearing and the record and move to deliberations either on another day or directly after the hearing. Yeah, so that was my brief overview.
Could you repeat that? You mentioned 26.2 acres are over a certain class of soils, and I didn't quite catch all of that.
So 26.2 acres are class 7 and 8 soils, and part of the definition for determining if a property is agricultural land is a predominance of class 1 through 6 soils.
Right. Yeah. So in your staff report, you've got you broke down some of the soil types that make up the area, and I can see where some of these are rated 7 or 8. So I can put those couple of pieces of information together and figure out which of the soil types we're talking about.
Sure.
Thank you.
I just think of, I haven't studied it in depth yet, but the history of agriculture in the area, access to agricultural water rights associated with it. And I'm sure it's all in there. I'm just putting out ideas about what I'll be looking for.
I'll mention this when we have our hearing as well, but I should go. I feel like I want to mention this now also. When the road department was moving forward with its significant capital project on Hunnell Road, a number of residents along Hunnell Road contacted the Board of Commissioners and expressed concern, like that this road widening, this road paving, this road straightening was being done to facilitate more development. And at the time, I said to people, this is a project that's been in the TSP for a number of years. This is, the road department is just getting to it. It's just kind of taken this long for them to get down their capital improvement project list. This is not about additional, facilitating additional development, but this rezone may be facilitating additional development in that area. So I'll just be trying to think about whether that creates any kind of bias on my part in hearing this specific proposal.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction on the topic. To say this public hearing will be scheduled for next week on this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Item number 12, first reading of ordinance number 2023-027, Bend Airport text amendment. Hello, Audrey. I assume this is a slight change.
Correct. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Audrey Stewart, Associate Planner with Community Development. The item before you today is the first reading of Ordinance 2023-027. And this is an ordinance approving an application for a text amendment to allow an air traffic control tower as a new use permitted in the airport development zone. I was before you on November 29th for a work session. And at that work session, the board voted to adopt the hearings officer recommendation. We haven't received any appeals, so I'm before you today with an adopting ordinance. I did receive a last minute request from the city of Bend that this be adopted by emergency. So you have two options today for this ordinance. The first is the one that was in your board packet. That follows the standard adoption procedure, which would include a 90-day waiting period. The city of Bend, we've had some coordination with their engineering team, and They will essentially want to make sure that the 90-day waiting period won't slow down when they can pull building permits for this project. So they've requested that we adopt it by emergency. So both are presented to you today for consideration. The only change between the two is the ordinance language. So the exhibits and the proposed text language is the same. Adopting by emergency would require unanimous support from the commissioners. And depending on what the board decides, you may choose to either use the suggested motion that's in your packet, or you may decide to move to conduct first and second reading and adoption by emergency of ordinance 2023-027. And with that, I'm available for any discussion from the board.
So one of my thoughts is maybe to adopt by emergency effective in 30 days. Just knowing that, let's respect a process here. Cities have 30-day ordinance opportunities is my understanding instead of 90 days. So that would align with the expectation of, just their efforts. And that would also remove that second reading in 2 weeks. So, it does compress it quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so, just respecting the emergency situation here is what I would say. So it'll still say by emergency, it'll just be effective 30 days.
Yeah, this is a very important safety project. So I would consider this an emergency worthy.
And thank you, commissioners, just based on where they are sort of in the design process and this, if we did return with an ordinance adopting it in 30 days, that likely still wouldn't slow down any issuance of building permits.
So you're saying 30 days from today would fit into the schedule?
Correct. It wouldn't. Just our current review to building permits is longer than 30 days anyways.
So yeah, that's my proposal, if you're supportive of that. So she's saying adopt today by emergency, and I'm saying effective 30 days from now, but complete it today. So then the clock starts for 30 days. And so I've got a history with emergency orders, just policy of groundwater protection ordinances before I even ran for office. So I'm always kind of hesitant to think that I would respond, on a moment's notice declaring an emergency.
So, okay, so there's this 30-day option, but what is the standard timeline?
The standard timeline would be, I would return in 2 weeks, which would be December 27th for a second reading, and then it would become effective 90 days from then.
Okay. So this is some kind of, this proposal is some kind of in between emergency and our standard timeline.
Correct. I believe Chair DeBone is suggesting that today's reading would be a first and second reading by emergency, but the effective date would be 30 days from today.
Okay, I can support that.
And as I said, I've been in that spot before where you kind of want to give, you want to shorten that 90-day window, but what's the emergency today? It's just shortening it is
right.
A little more business-like.
So we would want to specify that 30-day effective date in the motion.
Correct.
Okay. So we need to do a motion for first and second reading, and then a motion for emergency adoption with a 30-day effective date.
Correct.
Okay.
And I can do that since I changed it, if you know.
Sure. Okay.
So so I'll come up with the motion here. So move approval of first and second reading of ordinance number 2023-027, declaring an emergency with an effective date 30 days from today.
And by title only.
By title only. Oh, thank you very much. We could be here the rest of the afternoon.
You can do it all as one motion.
My
then
understanding
adopting.
was there was not an adoption. He was just notating that it would be effective it would be done by emergency and effective in 30 days. And then we can do a secondary motion for adoption.
I'll second.
Okay, yeah. So as I say, just the business case of what an emergency is really. So with that, I've made the motion, but calling for a vote, Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
And Chair will vote yes. So this is first reading of ordinance number 2023-027, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, Chapter 18.76, Airport Development Zone and Chapter 18.80 Airport Safety Combining Zone to add an air traffic control tower as a new permitted use and allowing an air traffic control tower to be up to 115 feet in height and declaring an emergency. Would I mention a 30-day effective date here?
You can do that in the adoption.
Okay. So then second reading of ordinance 2023-027, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, Chapter 18.76 Airport Development Zone and Chapter 18.80 Airport Safety Combining Zone to add an air traffic control tower as a new permitted use and allowing an air traffic control tower to be up to 115 feet in height and declaring an emergency. So if you're supportive, we can move adoption effective 90 days or 30 days.
I'll move adoption of ordinance number 2023, Bend Airport text amendment by emergency and effective in 30 days.
And I will second it.
Yeah, just clarify ordinance number 2023-027.
Yep, sorry. Did I not say 027?
No.
2023-027.
And I will second it for that clarification. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And Chair will vote yes. There we go.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Item number 13, long-range planning work plan update.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioner. It's Will Groves, your planning manager here for a quarterly check-in that we have for the Deschutes County Long Range Planning Division work plan. As you know, we do these in the spring, set a kind of a general annual goal, and then check in periodically with you to let you know how we're doing, what we're working on, what direction we're headed in, also to get some feedback from you about how we should make best use of our resources. So what I've got for you today is a memorandum. It discusses in Table 1 some of the projects that we've completed recently. We also have many large projects that are moving towards completion in the new year. So the Deschutes 2040 plan, the comprehensive plan update, that's got a continued hearing at the Planning Commission on Thursday. The transportation plan update has been through the board and is on its way to deliberations, as well as the Tumalo Community Plan. And we also have in process the Senate Bill 1013 RVs as rental dwellings, and that's moving through the Planning Commission. So some of the big projects that you've directed us to undertake are looking like they're going to wrap up sort of in kind of the first part of the new year. And we're starting to look forward to what we might do in the coming year with the resources that we have. It's important to note that that we are down effectively a person in long range as Tarek Rawlings switched to our transportation planner. We chose not to backfill that. So we're working with a little bit more limited resources, and we'll talk about kind of what we have a allocation for and see what the board would like us to do with that. Now, the first thing I want to tee up for you, of course, is the House Bill 3197, Clear and Objective Standards. We've talked to you about that a couple times. We did receive a DLCD grant to get some consultant support with that. The structure is a little bit unusual in that the DLCD manages the consultant, sets the scope of work, pays the bills for that, but they're going to bring some support to us for that process. And so that kind of setting of the budget and the scope are finishing up right now with discussions between the county, DLCD, the consultant. Looks like we're going to get about $100,000 to $130,000 worth of consultant effort, which I think is going to be really helpful. This consultant has worked previously on these types of projects inside cities. And so having some expertise about how to give clearer language on these approaches, this requirement is going to be really helpful. We'll be coming back to the board specifically on a meeting on this item. There's some choices to be made about the public engagement, for example. The jurisdictions that we've talked to have done this work. We talk about in planning the dot exercise where we all get in the high school gym with stickers and put them on poster boards. The jurisdictions that we've talked to have said that that generally hasn't been helpful in this type of update. And they've typically built with the consultant sort of a first cut at the code, given the public a chance to give some feedback, move to a second revision, and then started a public process associated with it. But as that starts to flesh out, I definitely want to come back to you and get some specific direction and engagement, making sure that we're using resources and running that project in a way that you'd like. You know, that said, is there any kind of preliminary thoughts or concerns or questions you have about that project at this point?
I guess one question I have is there is at this point, is there no hope we will get legislative relief on this clear and objective standards issue?
We, based on the most recent information we've got, there's no anticipation of significant changes about what our obligations are to get our code clear and objective with regard to housing by mid 2025. So there's some possibility that there might be items brought up on that, but in terms of significant changes, at least when I last heard, I didn't know that there was anything in motion. I see Nick up there.
I don't think there's any hope. There's
No hope.
Changes beyond what exists, which did take it from basically the entire county down to the rural residential areas and specified areas. But beyond that, I don't know that there's going to be hope beyond that.
Good to understand.
Mm-hmm. And I want to be careful to note that, to the extent that we bring up the difficulties associated with this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a big ask. It's an enormous project. There's going to be a lot of citizen engagement. And at the same time, everybody, I think, is on board with the notion that housing, we haven't provided as much as, ideally we would have. And that, the appeals process is really cumbersome. And this notion of clear and objective standards as a way to mitigate some of that is really valuable. So I would just, to the extent that we express concerns or the difficulties associated with it, we also, as planners, this is broadly a very important direction to head in. So I want to make sure that we don't ever appear to be opponents to the process and just noting the complexities.
So it says clear and objective standards for housing. I mean, so that refers to like a subset of the Deschutes County Development Code, I would think. Do we have a feel for the scope, the size of this elephant that we need to eat one bite at a time?
Is enormous.
Yeah, enormous. Okay.
It's going to be the biggest code update, in the end, if it all goes sort of to plan. Almost every chapter will have edits in it. Some of those will be pretty straightforward and
all at the same time.
Choices and all at the same time. And, it affects our Goal 5 inventories. But, it affects infrastructure significantly. So we've been talking to the road department. And as we've talked to our kind of the regulated public, the builders and the realtors who've worked under these similar regulations in cities, it seems like infrastructure is really the sticky wicket. I think I mentioned, for example, the city of Bend had a provision that a sewer line had to be close to a sidewalk, and that's what close is, isn't it clear and objective? So, just a lot of, fixes. And then if you want to say, the reason why you say close in a code is because you want there to be some latitude. You're like, it doesn't matter if it's exactly 2 feet or 6 feet, but it has to be not next to the gas line. Right? I'm making that up. I don't know.
Or not 100 feet away from something. Yeah, understood.
Yeah. And so then when you start specifying how it's going to be, it loses your ability in some ways to be nimble in particular circumstances. But luckily, again, this regulation includes a provision that says once you have a clear and objective path, you can have an alternative subjective path that the developer can pick. So if they don't want to be 3.5 feet away from, the sidewalk, they can come in through the subjective path, and we can work on what kind of the spirit and the right outcome is, as opposed to a literal but certain outcome.
So what the other thought that comes to mind is, what's the possibility that, the scope of development that could be triggered from this? I mean, my thought is not a lot, but I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking rural county. That's why I'm thinking like that. Yeah. I don't know if there's a survey of what the outcome could be here.
I think that it's going to be marginal. So,
Yeah.
In the end, at least at the outset, planning, and we'll be talking about this, is planning, doesn't conceive of at least the initial ask is to change the kind of the balance of regulation, although that's possible in this process, right? And so, I think we'll hear advocates for this should be easier, advocates for this should be more protective of some resource. So I think in the middle, and with your feedback at a future meeting, our initial, perspective that we've heard from other jurisdictions is try to, do it apples to apples and then let the process work and see how people want to discuss it. But I think what it's going to do is that someone who is sitting on the sidelines because they said, I want to develop this project, but I don't know if I'm going to end up in the courts and there's going to be an appeal and my timeline, ideally when this is completed, if they want to take the clear and objective path, they should be able to show up with a pile of paper and a check and, and come back out with a permit in a in an orderly manner.
So, yeah, I do see this is a big project. 2024 will be the meat and potatoes of getting it all done. If DLCD is, coordinating our, grant resources, I gotta, infer that they're coordinating across multiple jurisdictions, probably either one or multiple, contracts with resources, whatever that is. So then there's a higher level picture of this, what does it look like in the state of Oregon? So we don't have to run down all the paths by ourselves. Hopefully other jurisdictions are doing some of this too.
Yeah, there are other jurisdictions that are working in parallel, and cities have been down a lot of these paths. At the same time, one of the reasons we got this grant, was because we're going to be a bit of a pioneer for counties as we explore it. There's a handful of other counties that we're in close coordination with who are also moving quickly in the same direction. But,
but isn't this a rule across the state where everybody?
It is,
count
and
that?
it's important, and this was helpful in our discussions with DLCD. It was helpful to note that, what happens if we don't make these fixes is that our code is subject to appeal. It's not, it's not that the world ends. It's just that some of the regulations that we had, you and prior boards had put in place may not be enforceable. And so this is an effort to try and I think there may in the end be some triage here. What would be, what would be most, to be blunt, what would be most offensive to the community as a whole and to the board as a representative of that community if those regulations were unenforceable, come July 2025. So
But
how
aren't
often does it
counties-
happen? How egregious would it be in terms of orderly development?
Aren't all counties under this same?
Yes, but a lot of counties just implement state law directly.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the state law also allows local counties to be more restrictive, just not less. And since the 1980s, Deschutes County has chosen in many cases to be more restrictive. So
We could just throw the whole thing out.
Well,
And
so
say,
we
just
may-
follow the state rules.
well, the key is that you still have to demonstrate compliance with Goal 5. So cultural,
Yeah.
natural, historical resources, things of that nature, which, so if that's going to be one of the big lifts with this effort is to address clear and objective standards with Goal 5 resources where
Mhm.
Deschutes County has chosen to be more restrictive. And so those are going to be some of the big decisions for the board and planning commission.
But that
and
helps
others.
me understand why it doesn't look the same in each county. That's where I was going with that. So then, do you see one or more FTE doing this for the
Yeah,
next year and a half?
3.5 long range planners at this point. I anticipate it's going to eat 2 of them for a year and a half.
You too. Okay.
There's going to be certain ebbs and flows to that, surges. And I think there'll be times where we can sneak in projects, but, at least at the outset, that's
Minimal.
our start,
Understood.
the assumption of the resources that we'll be allocating to it. If it turns out to be easier, that'll be fantastic. And I'll be back before you to tell you about the amazing opportunities that we have for additional projects.
Did you say 2 long range planners for 2 years?
A year and a half. And it won't be 2 particular planners. We'll have different planners
Kind of the
rotating out, but
load
effectively
balance.
that level of
Yep,
effort.
got it. Well, that's good to understand then.
Yeah. And so if you're ready, I'll move into kind of the second major topic. And these are our regional community plans. So of course we do regional community plans for the Sisters Country area, for Tumalo, which we're just working our way through. 2 communities also up for these updates. We tend to do these on 10-year intervals, and both the Newberry Country Plan affecting South County and the Terrebonne Plan are both, at least time-wise, due for revisit. We anticipate that we have resources to do these sequentially and not in parallel. So we could, start with one, move to the next. As I mentioned in the memo, there's reasons to approach both of these. There's specific language in the Terrebonne Community Plan about revisiting this at such time as there's a sanitary district. At the same time, in South County, in the Newberry Country Plan area, the city of Lapine is engaging in their comprehensive planning effort and has specifically asked that the board that support moving the Newberry Country Plan forward. We've got support from the Newberry Regional Partnership. Thank you. So glad my team's here. The Newberry Regional Partnership. I had that in my notes. They're an independent organization working through coordinated through COIC, looking at regional opportunities. Also, we've gotten some feedback from particular communities. So 3 Rivers South, the area immediately south of Sun River, is looking to participate in these plans and see, how that their regional needs are being met through these planning efforts. So a lot of push to go south from our cooperating partners.
Yeah, on this question, there's, there's a couple ways to look at Terrebonne. With the sewer project and with the Lower Bridge Road intersection, under construction soon, there will be some substantial change in Terrebonne in the next couple of years. My question is, do we need a community plan to accompany that change, or do those two infrastructure projects just kind of drive very clear change, and very clear development opportunities, which will kind of just fall into place and just need to be, run through the application process, building inspections, et cetera. So that's one of the things I'm trying to, I would like to get my head around, because if that's the case, if, creation of a sewer means there's going to be a whole bunch of specific, building applications, and that'll keep, that absorbs a substantial amount of CDD attention for a couple of years. Maybe it's actually better to do the community plan after the dust settles from a lot of that commotion that flows directly out of those infrastructure changes, or maybe not. So, I mean, do you have any sense of that you could share with me?
Yeah, what you've outlined is a great perspective. And I'm going to, instead of saying but, I'm going to say and. Here's some, other things that are in the mix. I think, and the people of Terrebonne, when we talked to them last, recognized that the availability of a sanitary district could change the physical development of Terrebonne rapidly. And so, they, just like Tumalo, they've got a lot of language in their plan that they love the small town feel, and they love the level of development that's there, and that they were worried a decade ago that, should a sanitary district come, that would represent rapid changes to the community. I think that in some ways the code is built currently to take advantage of the physical limitations that septic resources have constrained the community with. And that if sewer is going to become widely available, potentially even beyond where it is now, that generally a community plan and the associated zoning would be more robust to think about that type of development, because right now there's an allowance for multifamily housing, so apartment complexes of up to 30 feet in height. And, right now, because of, septic, that's really, you might at most see a 3-unit apartment complex. Under this sewer scenario, you might see, entire blocks converted. I know there's nobody lining up to do that, but there's also, it's now become physically possible to do that, whereas physically impossible previously. And that's going to have transportation, community, resource, just overall the integration of all these things, definitely would benefit from some planning. And at the same time, back to your original point, is sometimes seeing some on the ground, like, we saw X happen and we didn't love it as a community. We'd like to, talk about that. It can be easier when you have some concrete examples. So there are reasons to move, there are reasons to hold. I think the thing that at least is somewhat compelling is just, honoring the previous process where they set a very clear trigger that said, if sanitary district comes, we want to talk again about our community.
Do we have a sense of the timeline for the actual construction of the sanitary sewer project?
I don't. Nick, do you
Well,
have new information?
I don't know exactly. The road project is expected to begin next year, and with that project, I think that's when the initial infrastructure is going in, along with some of the part of the road. So it'll be a couple of years beyond that I think that it would then begin to extend beyond the Highway 97 kind of corridor area. But I'm not certain, but it'll be a few years for sure.
So, I mean, that's another way to look at this. I mean, that in the last community plan, they said, well, the trigger is when sewer is available. And formation of a district is one thing. Actually having sewer available, physically available through infrastructure is another thing. And if that's a couple of years out, and that might be another reason to hold on the Terrebonne community plan for a little bit. I mean, we're talking about a year, maybe, right? And on the other hand, thinking about the Newberry Country Plan, we have just seen, that this Newberry Regional Partnership, I'll call it a visioning process, but none of them called it a visioning process, but basically I see it as a visioning process. We've just seen that visioning process complete. The city of Lapine is in the middle of their comp plan process. These are pretty compelling reasons to me to move forward with that plan, a community plan, sooner than later.
Is the Terrebonne community plan for the urban unincorporated community plat area or the larger area also?
To date, it's been specific, like the Tumalo plan, it's been specific to the area within the historic urban, with the unincorporated community. And at the same time, we have the kind of the issue that we see with our other, cities and jurisdictions is that a lot of people there's a lot of people who think of themselves as from Tumalo who are, a mile outside of that boundary. And it's, care a lot about what that community looks like.
Because then, now that there's a city of Lapine, the Newberry Country Plan is the same, is the opposite of that. It's everything but the city of Lapine now, very specifically. And I know the first version of that was kind of the transition of, okay, there's a new city and there's a new, Newberry Country Plan. So that's interesting dynamic there. The regional partnership efforts, they're doing community listening sessions with committee work right now too. So they are proceeding with more depth analysis on some of these areas. So yeah, Terrebonne, it sounds like we just $190,000 for engineering or something. We just wrote them another check. We were able to do that, but that's still a few years away. So I kind of come to the same conclusion you do, Commissioner.
I mean, I guess
it's just priority wise
to go back to that scenario that Will mentioned, a full block long apartment complex, proposal. When in the process of the development of the sewer might we realistically expect a proposal like that to show up?
I think that it would depend on the timing of the pipe being in the ground and being usable. At the same time, I think you're going to see a third stream moving, which is this clear and objective standard. So right now, for example, those type of multifamily complexes are conditional uses in the code. So they have, sort of a broad safety catch, which is this suitable? Is this compatible? And, at least under House Bill 3197, the objective at the outset would be to make that clear and objective that said, if you have this many units and this much parking and this much landscaping, and the utilities say it's good, you get this without kind of over broader compatibility or suitability considerations that are currently in the code. So I think that's also going to be moving at the same time.
And that's where the Tumalo plan says, pursue legislative discussion about limiting to 4 units at a maximum or something said.
And that Tumalo community plan direction, or, if that 4 unit max plays out, if that is clear and objective.
Yeah, that's it says it's a quadplex. We know what a dwelling unit is. There's 4 of them in this box.
And how will that play out? How will the existence of that direction in the Tumalo community plan play out in our clear and objective standards process? Would it just say in Tumalo you can do this, or?
But that'll be a question before the board. So right now there's relatively few clear and objective sideboards on multifamily housing because there's this broad subjective standard, which is it compatible, is it suitable? And so, as we work through that process, you'll definitely be, ultimately the plan commission, ultimately this board will be struggling with, what type of sideboards, if any, to put on this. Is there, an appropriate density? Is there, and that's going to be in some ways a community conversation too, about what level of development appears appropriate to a community, and how do you balance that? We've got the clear and objective was intended to make it easier to get housing. Certainly this type of housing is, something that could be part of that picture. And at the same time, it can result in traffic or have livability, community feel changes that might not be welcome by the community broadly. So I think we're going to be jumping into some of those discussions as part of the clear and objective process, independent of these community plans. Concurrently, the Tumalo plan, if adopted as proposed by, with the 4-unit, the quadplex limitation, that would be something that we would then subsequently, with board direction, move towards a legislative process that says, in Tumalo, you can have multifamily housing, but that means up to 4 units in a single building. And we may just move that concurrently with the clear and objective process. Hey, board, you've given us, direction to do this. We're changing these regulations. Do we move that simultaneously? Do we move that separately? That'll be kind of part of our future discussions about how we try to get this all aligned.
What would that what would that 4-plex cap look like on a whole block, implemented across a whole block? I mean, how many 4-plexes is that?
It's going to be interesting because as we set those standards, are we going to require on-site parking? Are we going to move to on-street parking? That's a big question. Are we going to require these structures? So large apartment complexes, typically have, green space up to and including community assets like, a community, not center, but like a hall or a playground or a swing set. Are you going to, are we going to ask for those sort of amenities as part of larger developments? Or, as you chunk these out in units of 4, do you not cumulatively get there, although you end up with a lot of dwelling units in the space? There's a lot of moving pieces associated with it. Right now, Tumalo, of course, is split up into, primarily per property ownership. So we don't have generally large LLCs holding whole blocks, for example, but, I have watched over time as some properties have switched over from, individual ownership to LLC ownership. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of those are, situating themselves for future sewer and the development possibilities that come with it.
So, I can give you thoughts, but there's nothing jumping out at me like, oh, we got to go do this next. So, that's my kind of, main thought here. So what other input do you need for today?
I think, so we would, based on your direction today, we would come back to you in a subsequent meeting and say, hey, you had indicated a general preference to explore what it might be like to go to Terrebonne or to Newberry. Here's, depending on which fork you sent us down, we would come back with sort of a detailed meeting about here's the timeline, here's the scope, here's the type of engagement that we would typically do. What do you think about that? We would engage with some of the other partners more intensely and say, yeah, the board's given us a general go ahead to do this in the next year or so. How does that integrate with your processes? How do we make sure we don't confuse your processes? How do we maximally leverage the community meetings that you've already done and not make this seem redundant? How do we time this well with, for example, the groundwater, the groundwater sampling update and that to make sure that integrates well. So that would be all a subsequent meeting. I think you're asking the right questions. I think that there's a number of our community partners in South County who are saying, hey, strike while the iron's hot. We're all in motion right now. Let's do this together, including, the city of La Pine expressly asking that. With Terrebonne, I think you're right that, we're years out from the effort, the point where the community starts changing, and that to the extent that this falls second in sequence, it seems like the possibility of sort of unwelcome outcomes or missed opportunities is lower if we go towards South County as the initial effort.
I'll just offer, I do think it would be helpful for the board to give indication, if not today, in short order, because they have emerging capacity. And so they're looking forward to initiate one of the 2 plans so they can begin to gear up for it, scope it, engage the community and move forward. So I'm here to see Will shaking his head yes. And
Newberry Country before Terrebonne is where I'm at. I mean, yeah, if you're looking for clarity, let's go. And just because of the reasons you mentioned, so we're all seeing that. One of the scenarios I see is people come from all around to drive, not everybody, but a lot of people come from all around to go to the post office and check their mailbox, right? Once or multiple times a week. And when they're driving into town, and not everybody understands what's inside and outside the city, they're seeing a lot of activity. So there's lots of community conversations about why did that whole field of trees just get dropped and who's doing what over there? Even if it's in the city and they live outside the city, they're asking a lot of questions right now. So yeah, right now people are very engaged.
They are. And I'll just offer the other piece is that when a dozen years ago, when we created the first Newberry Country Plan, a lot of the issues that rural residents raised addressed the city. And the fact that the city is initiating their comprehensive plan update now, the fact that they could be coordinated, and as the issues, in fact, in our Newberry Country Plan, we said rather than putting these in a parking lot separately, we included them and said coordinate with the city on, and we just had a list. Now it's nice that as the city is creating their plan, we can say, well, here's the city's process. It's best to interact with them, and our plan will focus on the rural areas. So it's the timing really couldn't be better if that's what the board is inclined to proceed with.
And I mean, not necessarily from the community development department, but in the grand scheme, the county, through those big infrastructure projects, the sewer project and through the Lower Bridge Road interchange project, the county has been giving a lot of attention and investment to Terrebonne in the last couple of years. So I given that the concerns that come from the sewer project are probably a couple of years out, I think it's reasonable to go to South County first and come back next year for the Terrebonne Community Plan.
There you go.
Thank you so much. We'll be back with some kind of initial scoping and some ideas and engagement. All right, so that's probably going to take of our 3.5 long-range planners. That's probably going to take somewhere between a half and probably half a planner over the next year to engage in that. Of course, there's some of our regular ongoing commitments that eat kind of roughly another planner, and those are BPAC and the Historic Landmarks Commission, interaction with cities, anything interesting that comes out of the 2024 legislative session. Certainly, we've got dark skies that we need to come back to you about. We've had some stakeholder engagement with that and are ready to come back and seek further direction from you about how to allocate those resources. But in addition to that, you saw on table 3 sort of a list of projects that we've had out there that the board has at one time or another expressed interest in. There's some possibility that, either some of these projects are easier than anticipated or they have, significant swings in workload. It may be that we find somebody who's one of the projects is stalled out for a month or two and we can start running with something else. Just wanted to know, generally speaking, if any of these caught your eye or you had questions about them or just had other thoughts or questions about the memo generally. To the extent that we wouldn't undertake any of these secondary projects without coming back to you and saying we've got resources. You had showed some interest in X and Y. We were thinking one of those two. What do you think? So just wondering if any of these had kind of relative priorities or that you were interested in them should we find ourselves with additional resources.
And that's where I said none of them jump out at me. I mean, they're all interesting, on their own, but none of them are like, oh, we got to get to this one. So yeah, I don't really have any guidance at this time. And it's a little deeper analysis about why would we pick one before another right now.
The one that these are all important projects, and I would agree that there's reason to do any of them on this list, but I do think that the childcare facilities and industrial zones, enabling that is it contributes to the regional efforts to expand childcare in our community. So I would elevate that one a little bit.
Okay, and that one's we'll certainly come back to before we initiate that project, but that one's nice because it's relatively mechanical. I don't think there's going to be a lot of opposition to it. and most of it comes out of state law. So that's a nice fill-in piece of work if we have some resources. So it's
Well, and what industrial zones in the rural industrial zones?
yeah. So we've got a couple rural industrial zones. We've got one in Tumalo. So I don't know that we're going to see a ton of development out of this, and at the same time, people are looking everywhere for opportunities.
Yeah. No, I mean, rural industrial is, it is significant in the county, and people are trying to add to it every year. So might as well create one more eligible, authorized use within those locations that our community very much needs.
Thank you. Was there anything else in the memo that you were interested in or wanted to discuss today?
It's good to see everything on one page here because it's a reminder to me as you're reading through. It's like, oh, okay, this is the scope of what, the next digestible pieces could be for changing the code. As I say, clear and objective standards is just a big one right now.
And I really want to thank all of you for your engagement and your attention to this. Like you said, there's a huge number of things moving on the menu, that memo, and that you're aware of and are tracking all of them. We really appreciate the attention that you pay to this and the care that you put to it. And it's thank you so much for that.
And Chair, as I just shared with Peter separately, I just find the list of accomplishments that the department has, in the planning division in particular, has achieved is really impressive. I just wanted to give them the.
Well, thank you for that reminder.
recognition.
So backing up, that was my first observation, is the fact that, well, there's a few things on here that we didn't ask for, it just kind of came our way. So, even no matter what we do for planning about what we think we're going to do in the next 12 months, there's other things that show up. So yeah, absolutely. A special thank you for the work that's gotten done this year. I mean, this, think of it as the end of the calendar year. Yes. Thank you for all the effort and, the times we've seen you in getting these projects over the finish line.
Yeah, thanks so much. I definitely want to thank my team and Peter for helping us keep it all together. There's been a lot moving, and everybody's been a vital part of it. And just really appreciate everyone.
Yeah. No, there's so many projects in this completed list that are incredibly important to our community. That there's also things that didn't make it all the way to the finish line, but we did a whole lot of work on, which I greatly appreciate from the CDD staff as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that's it for our published agenda items. I think we do have executive session and then maybe other items today. Any other items, Commissioner?
No.
So as I mentioned yesterday at our budget committee meeting, I was able to attend the Leadership Summit, Oregon Business Plan Leadership Summit. So I think it was the 23rd year it's been going on. But it was really good to have, the governor was very engaged. She kind of ran a session and got interviewed. So it was really good to see that much engagement by the governor on the stage. Good discussions. There was a priority, as I say, real-time voting for about 10 items in the room. About 700 something people all got involved. I was looking for the published results on that, but Oregon tax system and Clarity I'm funding for K-12, I think were the two big ones out of the 10, and then other different topics. One of them that I voted for. So it was one of those online vote on your phone things, and it wasn't clear if you could vote once or twice or multiple times. So I voted for 3 things. Other people said, I just voted once. It was like, it just kept taking my vote. So I don't know how many times we could have voted. But one of them was Prepare for Cascadia event, which is interesting, from our point of view and my point of view with Core 3 participation right now. So as I say, I think that was, some of them were at 50% voting, and I don't know how the statistics work because, as I say, it was 700 people that may have voted one or more times, but that was kind of one of the smaller ones in the room. It was like 20-something% for the Cascadia relative to all the other discussions. So I voted for it. Anything else? Another?
Yes, Commissioners, 2 items. One is, and if Dave would like to join us or we can lead us, but we're in the process, as you know, of creating an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Judicial Department regarding the $15 million state allocation for the courthouse project. And Dave, I don't know if you want to share a few comments or you want me to kick it off, but I can turn it over to you if you prefer. Great, thank you.
So we had a meeting a week or so ago, with the OJD and their attorneys. Trial court administrator, myself, Robert Tintle, and, essentially we had an IGA with OJD for the initial $2 million that they were putting into the project, including furniture and $1.5 million towards hard costs. And they were going to amend that agreement to reflect the $15 million that the legislature set aside for the county for the courthouse. So they've done that, and really I think the issue that the board needs to be cognizant of before moving forward is they did want essentially a first right of refusal for the third floor shell. We pressed them on that and ultimately came to agreement, although the draft they sent over didn't quite capture that. If you have a copy of my scribbled revisions. I saw it. Basically, Robert and I shared, and Lee was on the phone call as well, that's right, Lee. And we shared with them that we could recommend to the Board of Commissioners to accept language that provided some sort of a first right of refusal for courtroom purposes. We didn't think it would be reasonable if they were going to just put staff up there, if they were going to use it for storage or anything of that nature. But to the extent they need it for courtroom purposes, which would be adjudicated matters either before a judge or perhaps a referee, that they'd have an ability to say, hey, we need that now. And obviously that's subject to funds and availability. It doesn't obligate the county to go out and build 2 new courtrooms. Certainly if there aren't 2 new judges or if the county doesn't have the money to build those out. So what they were concerned about is that shell would be available and then it would be used by the county for very county-centric purposes. And then it would be very difficult to unwind that at some point down the road when they needed it for actual courtroom expansion. And so what we came up with was this concept that they'd have a first right of refusal. They'd give us a certain window of notice. They proposed 3 months. I'm proposing 9 months, where they would say, hey, we need it. And then of course, that's all contingent again on funds availability. They just wanted to make sure that that facility was going to be available because they feel that their 15 million is buying at least a piece of that and that they should have some claim to that. Yeah. I think their biggest fear was, again, that the county was going to use it for a very county-centric purpose and that would be hard to unwind. And we assured them there were no plans of that nature. I told them I surmised if it's used at all anytime soon, it'll just be for some storage, something up there. That there wasn't any real viability to move court staff into that area. There wasn't viability to move DA's office staff into that area. Lee has said to even put up temporary type cubicles and whatnot would be incredibly cost prohibitive, and then to tear all those down if 3-4 years down the road the court's tapping us on the shoulder saying, hey, we need it for court purposes, that there'd be a tremendous amount of expense in that. And so in any event, that's where it's at. I can share with you, I thought the OJD was very very firm on their position that they wanted to have that right for that shell for court purposes when and if needed.
And Dave, who from the OJD are we talking about? I mean, is Judge Ashby or somebody from our circuit court present for these discussions? Or
one of their attorneys that is on board with this, and works with the legislature when there's funding packages. And so the legislature provided the 15 million. They don't put all the strings to it. The OJD in this case then puts all the strings to it. So that's what we're trying to work through at this point. And I think really the only glitch is them wanting that third floor available for courtroom purposes if and when those are needed. Again, I can't fathom in my own mind that that's going to be needed anytime soon with the 2 new courtrooms that are going to be built.
Right.
Yeah. They have a lot of courtrooms over there now. They have some hearing space on top of that. So I'm not seeing that as a real concern. They're going to be expecting some level of courtrooms build out on that third floor anytime soon.
Yeah. And them and us paying to shell out the third floor is one thing. Them and us coming up with the funds to actually create finished courtrooms at some later date in that third floor that's a whole nother thing.
Absolutely, and there are big dollars associated with that. And quite frankly, I can't see a scenario where they could make a good faith request for that unless and until the legislature awarded additional judges to the county.
Right.
And, you know, I'm guesstimating, you know, you're looking at 5 to 10 years before that's gonna happen again. There's
Right.
a whole bunch of other counties that are still waiting for their first one, and Deschutes County was awarded too, so.
Right.
I'm banking we're pretty far down the list for a while.
Well, it's good to have something in writing here. I do support the concept of for courtroom purposes, but it's a Deschutes County building. You know, yes, we're hosting, but we're hosting all the DA costs and the courthouse long term and everything too. So interesting seeing them come up with this idea and getting a little aggressive. But yeah, thank you very much for representing the county on that matter.
I suspect, Commissioner, to be quite honest with you, there was an undercurrent, I think, of, wait a minute, weren't you the guys 3 years ago that said, give us a judge, we'll build the courthouse?
Oh, well, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
The under 35 counties.
Yep.
And then we gave you 2 judges and you came out with your hat in hand and said, give me some more money. And we gave you 15 million. And now you're saying we have no way.
Well, but that doesn't, yeah, that's fine. That's,
I
yeah.
think that's the rub in here.
Yep.
I think there's an element of that kind of playing that,
Yeah.
you know, there are people with memories over there.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
The whole push for judgeship started, it was predicated on, and we don't need any of your money. You know, whereas all these other counties asking for judges need your money.
And that was the day right before inflation shot up. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
I think there's an element of that at play.
That's fine.
That, you know, so there have been these discussions about having a federal magistrate court located on that 3rd floor. That's not,
I think Kim can speak to that better. She was in some meetings on that, but the size alone would preclude that.
Okay.
It's not large.
but
Want to share? I know you were in some meetings.
I just wanted to make sure that none of this, that wasn't an undercurrent in these negotiations about this document.
I don't believe it was an undercurrent.
Trying to
Maybe it was
preclude.
Later in the process,
Okay.
when they caught wind, there were some discussions with federal courts.
And my understanding is, I believe that has been taken off the table. I wasn't in the last meeting, that county admin was.
And my understanding is that the bare minimum square footage that the federal courts would need, they need the entire building, all 3 floors of it. And the 3rd floor isn't sufficient.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Just
Because
have
when
one,
they- when
just
they-
have one magistrate judge.
When they built federal courts, they put in FBI, they put in all kind of other folks, and they need space for that. And that 3rd floor.
Interesting.
Dave's correct in that the square footage needed for our it exceeded what would be available in the 3rd floor shell. I do believe Commissioner Adair had reached back out and inquired about the potential of was there a middle ground between the square footage they articulated to us in the meeting and the square footage that would be available in the 3rd floor shell, to try to see, just to sort of further explore that concept. But I'm not aware that she's received a response back to that initial follow-up.
So are we going to get there, or do you need some guidance on this? Because thank you very much.
The commissioners are comfortable with this, giving the OJD this first right of refusal. In essence, the ability to say, okay, it's time, we need it for court purposes. And again, not necessarily requiring you to go out and build it, because that's going to be subject to funds availability, but not being blocked out because you put offices there and now it's not available for court purposes.
And so the red edits that you put on this document, these have been accepted by OGD, or these are what you'd like to bring back to them?
Correct. We were waiting to hear the board, get your input in the direction. Robert had one little tweak as well. The bond council wants, it's going to be an issue that isn't reflected on the red lines there, but it's just moving some parentheses actually in a code site. So but the bond council wanted that. So we'll make sure that gets done and we'll clean this up. One thing I did want to add in here, and I didn't get a chance to get a second version to you, even though the understanding is, and it's reflected elsewhere, that it's any future build out of courtrooms is subject to funds availability. We're going to include that in this blurb as well on reserving that. That's a whole separate issue.
Well, and I support, I mean, the day that does come around, maybe a full different set of people. So it'll be a good piece of paper to say, okay, these are the future courtrooms, even though it's the whatever it could be used for in the next 3 to 5 years or 10 years. These are future courtrooms. So I support that concept in there.
And that was the gist of what they.
Yep.
Just to make sure that was understood.
Yeah.
The primary purpose of that third floor shell is for courtroom expansion in the future. So don't be doing things there that are gonna make that impractical.
Hard to unwind. Yep.
I think everybody was on the same page. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, Lee indicated he just thought the cost would be very prohibitive to put office space there temporarily and then tear it down in 3 or 4 years with the various building codes, fire codes. You just can't put little lean-tos in there and call them office spaces. There'd be a lot of additional cost and work that you'd be tearing up if and when you had it converted to courtrooms.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of this, the language and the ongoing discussion, so there weren't any surprises going forward. Thank you.
We'll get this back to OJD ideally today, certainly no later than tomorrow. And at that, I think we're probably really close. I would be surprised if they push back. And then they've indicated in the agreement, within 14 days of signature that they'll be funding that 15.
Great.
Get that in the bank and start drawing interest on it right away.
Be good. Good time to be drawing interest right now.
Yeah.
So do we need a motion or anything like that, or?
I'm not sure no motion was required. We just wanted you to
Mhm.
be aware of it. And if you have any objection or concerns, I'm interpreting that you're aware of it. You don't have any major objections or concerns, so we'll proceed in similar fashion with what you have here. Keep it posted as we go along.
I support your red line edits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair, we have one more item. Our Community Justice Director, DV Holcomb, we have a timely matter here regarding whether or not the board wishes to protest part of a grant agreement. And DV, if I may, I'll just turn it over to you to summarize it. I did share the email with the board. I'm not sure. I expect they might have it. And if not, I have Commissioner DeBona. I have a copy for him as well if he would like it.
So I was able to review that. Please, kind of put it in perspective for us again. Yeah.
Right, so a quick review, the Criminal Justice Commission offers Justice Reinvestment Initiative, JRP, funding to counties, formula funding based on population, and then a competitive funding that is competitive that you apply for. The county applied with approval, from LIPSIC and then the Board of County Commissioners, and we were preliminarily funded of 100% of our formula, which was good, and a nice chunk of our competitive application was also awarded. Part of those applications and any subsequent awards are required to provide 10% of the total funding to victim services agencies. They've been doing that for, 10, 15 years or so now, I guess. The LIPSIC board and then BOCC approved 5 different victim services agencies for the current plan that's in question. And when the CJC went to, review all of those applications, declined to fund one of those, which is called In Our Backyard. And there's a protest period that is allowable. And the reasoning that the Criminal Justice Commission gave is that the program was not providing services to victims, but was focusing on prevention activities only. So I looked at the application again, and I think I provided that to you in that email, as well as the budget. And I do believe that they're halfway correct. I think half of the program is pretty fully prevention. They want to do prevention work in schools with young people who have not experienced trafficking. But they do fully also have programming for adults and young people who have been trafficked, who are survivors. So I thought that, I think that there's 50%. Their budget is not easily dividable. It's kind of one budget that kind of combines both elements of their programs. My suggested recommendation was if we did want to protest that. So 2 of the members of LIPSIC who voted, for that panel of victim services agencies that were then approved by everybody on LIPSIC did want to protest. I didn't hear specifically from the other 2, whether they did or they did not. So I'm just wanting to put that to your attention. The protest period, I believe the protest must be received by December 20th.
And process-wise, it's a little confusing to me. The state would accept a letter from the LIPSIC chair and vice chair, I'm sure, as advisory to county, and it is, you know, county funding. I feel better and will feel better if that request comes from this body, as will Judge Ashby, who's the chair of LIPSIC, based on my conversation with him.
So if there was a protest and an award, does that redistribute the dollars or would it add to the dollars? You said there was 100% fund.
The competitive, we got a good chunk of them.
Yes, we did. Yeah, it redistributes it. Thank you. They don't remove, like, the piece that was declined doesn't get removed from anything. It just would be distributed amongst the 4 remaining victim services agencies and doesn't touch our total allocation at all.
They don't have additional funds that they would, you know, magically say, oh, you know, we were wrong. This was eligible, so we'll cut you another $10,000 or something.
Correct. Yeah, the allocation would just be more similar to what it, you know, would have been had they approved it initially. Yeah, same pie, different pieces.
Well, I was one of the people on the LIPSIC who reviewed these applications, and I was surprised that the In Our Backyard application, you know, it was basically one reviewer who really scored it pretty low and kind of shifted the averages so that the ranking for this application was significantly lower than the others. So, you know, if we protest and are successful, then they'll just redistribute the funds, the competitive funds that have been allocated to Deschutes County among all of the applicants. And if we're not successful, then the funds just stay with the originally awarded.
Yeah. The Victim Services Fund just followed the total amount of the award. So the total amount of the award was not changed at all. It was just how they were going to allow us to use it.
Okay.
So protesting, no protesting, we still receive the same amount.
I would support submitting a protest.
Okay.
So I'm kind of neutral on it, but I mean, if we want to, support, that's fine. You know, I'll go that way. I don't feel real strong about it. You know, I mean, what they're doing is important work, obviously, wanting to get the word out. And it's going to be tough times, you know, trying to redistribute the dollars too. So there's 2 sides to it.
Yeah.
I can offline, I'll try to figure out the best process wise as far as what the protest looks like. It's not explicit in their description. I don't think it would involve a vote by the board, but I'm actually not sure about that.
So In Our Backyard, you mentioned that they may be able to reconfigure how they do money and, you know, kind of make 2 different cases so they can say, this is what we want you to fund instead of the conglomerate.
Yeah, I think we can protest on a couple of different bases. And the one basis I think we can protest on is half of their program, as described, definitely serves victims.
But they could even write it up, kind of showing that more, so it's more clear on a piece of paper.
Yeah, they could.
Yeah. Is filing a protest a substantial amount of work for community justice?
I am not sure of the process. This happened once about 6 years ago, but I don't recall the formality or the extensiveness of it. We can certainly look into it. I mean, I think it's fine. It's doable. We'll figure it. Okay, so I'll take this as a yes to start that protest process, and I'll just be in touch if I find out more process wise or logistics. And may I just to confirm on the basis of the portion of the application that was related explicitly to victims, not to also protest the prevention side? Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Here we go. Okay. So that's it for other items.
Items, just executive session with labor and a new potential litigation.
Okay, so this time that's the end of our agenda. We will go to executive session. But yeah, published for labor negotiations, ORS 1926602D, and then possible other item. So we'll, turn off the